All right, boys and girls. So it's day 2 of our poetry unit. The first specific type of poetry, or the first specific poetic technique we're going to study is repetition. Okay, and it's the use of repetition in poetry. So repetition is a literary device that repeats the same words or phrases a few times to make an idea clear or more memorable. Also, to leave impact, right? We talk a lot about this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday in terms of why authors and writers do what they do. Author's craft. We've talked a lot about this throughout the school year in terms of literature, but it really comes into play in poetry because poetry is supposed to often be dramatic. It's supposed to make a lasting impression on a reader, okay? And the different techniques that poets use, like repetition, have that purpose. So let's take a look at a poem that has repetition, and let's think about what the author's purpose was. Why did the author use repetition here? Okay, so I want you to go for a second and read this poem aloud to yourself right now, and then I want you to think about how think about what the poet is repeating and why. So go ahead. I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds. Okay, now I want you to listen to me read the poem, okay? The title of the poem is Open a Book. Open a book and you will find people and places of every kind. Open a book and you can be anything you want to be. Open a book and you can share wondrous words you find in there. Open a book and I will too. You read to me and I'll read to you. So why do we think the poet chose these words or phrases to repeat? What was their purpose? What impact were they trying to make on the reader? Well, is it possible that this poet, or the repetition this poet used, allowed them to emphasize the main idea of the poem, which is the power of books, the power of reading, the power of opening a book, and what are you going to find in there, or what can you come across, or what can you realize when you open that book? It also adds to the rhythm, right? If you know that there's repetition, you know where you can enunciate, you know where you can add inflection to your voice. And inflection, or the pitch of your voice and how it goes up and down, changes the mood that you set with your writing, and it also changes the impact that you can have on your reader. Just like when you're writing books, the impact is what's important. Let's try it again with another poem. This poem is titled Poem. Okay, so I want you to, again, go ahead and read this poem aloud to yourself. Think about what words or phrases are the poet repeating and possibly why. Go ahead, I'll give you about 30 seconds. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and read it. Poem. I love you, my friend. He went away from me. There's nothing more to say. The poem ends, soft as it began. I loved my friend. Interesting. In this case, the poet didn't repeat the same word or phrase all throughout the poem. Instead, they decided to begin and end the poem with the same phrase. Okay, and this is just another way to use repetition to emphasize the main idea of a poem. In this case, it's showing us how deeply this poet or this person cared for a friend that left them for whatever reason. Okay, so now your assignment for today is, first I want you to read a whole bunch of repetition poetry, okay? I want you to immerse yourself specifically in repetition poetry. So I want you to visit the 4th grade poetry Padlet using the link that I posted on Google Classroom. I want you to go to the repetition tab, and I want you to read all the poems that incorporate repetition. And here's a little challenge for you. I personally wrote one of those poems. I'm not going to tell you which one. Let's see if you can figure out which poem I wrote. And if you want to post your assumptions in Google Classroom in the comments thread of today's assignment post, you may. And anybody who gets it right will get a ticket. After that, oh, I'm sorry. When you are reading those repetition poems, I want you to try reading them aloud. And I want you to listen to how the rhythm is affected by the repetition. And I want you to see if you can allow the repetition to impact your inflection when you're reading. See if you can do what I did, playing with the inflection of my voice based on the repetition. After that, you have a writing assignment. I want you to then choose a new idea or an idea from your heart map. If you can't come up with anything else, it's up to you. You can choose from anywhere. That's what the heart map is for. I want you to then practice writing some poetry using repetition. After you've written a whole bunch of poems, and I mean a bunch, I'm not going to give you a number. I gave you a number of 10 yesterday, but I don't want to give you a number. I want you to just write long and strong poetry. Write as many poems as you can bang out, okay? After you write a whole bunch of poems, repetition poems, then I want you to visit Mr. DiRienzo's Poetry Paradise Padlet and post one of your repetition poems. Be sure that the repetition poem you post is appropriate and best represents who you are as a poet or a writer of repetition poetry. Okay? Good? All right.